Oh my goodness, I don't know where anything's gone.
Hopefully. But then the other thing too is there's quite a delay between StreamYard and going on to Facebook.
Right, okay. I've been so incredibly nervous about this.
So, hello, Agatha. Thank you for joining us today. It's very much appreciated. I can see that you've put a comment up in on the page. I don't know whether that's through YouTube or Facebook, because my Facebook live feed hasn't come up yet, which is interesting. But there we are, and if you can see if we can get that to work. Or it always takes a while for this to happen. And see what's going on. Hi, Cindy. Thank you for joining us. It's a bit better time of the day now for you than it was for the 10 a.m. well, 11 a.m. Stamperia time, 10 a.m. UK time post from this morning. Hi, Morag. Thank you for joining us. It's very much appreciated.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Laura. Thank you. Hi, Jill. Hello, Patty. Lucrezia, you're in the background. Are you wanting us to start, or are you going to do an introductory thing first?
Hello, girls. Now you can do as you want. You can do an introduction of yourself, and then starting with the project. I will be in the back. Hello, everyone. I am dealing with the comments in the background with the cameras. So you are free to manage your live as you want.
Okay, so once I go live and move my camera, I won't be able to see the comments, and my Facebook feed on my camera on my computer hasn't gone on, everyone. So if I don't comment on you, please don't take offence. So I'm Jill. I've been doing the been working with Laura at That's Crafty now for a few years, and I'm definitely a Stamperia addict. I'm on the design team for That's Crafty, which is one of the companies in the UK that supplies Stamperia products. And I'm going to let Rachel introduce herself to you while I move my camera so that it's pointing at my project rather than my ugly mug. So I shall see you shortly.
Oh, thanks, Jill. I'm Rachel Harris, and like Jill, I'm lucky enough to be on the design team of That's Crafty, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have been asked to come and do a live for Stamperia, because, well, I'm sort of slightly obsessed with the products, and certainly really looking forward to sharing some of the things that I've been doing with the products with you. And like I said, it's just a terribly exciting experience for me, and really looking forward to sharing with you. And I'll let Jill carry on now.
If I click on this, I might eventually have a live on my computer so I can see what we're doing. Excellent. Okay, so this always takes a little bit of time for the two to catch up with each other. So I am going to be making this project today. It primarily focuses on lots of the resin pieces from That's Crafty, and I don't understand why that's decided to do that and go the opposite way. So let me, Lucrezia, can you take me out so I don't make people seasick?
Okay. Well, while Jill's sorting that out, what I'll do is I'll actually put the camera down and I will show you the project that I want to share with you today. Hi, Karen. Hi, Marie. So this is the project that I'm going to do today. Actually, I need to just turn it on because it's got some illumination. So we're going to be looking at I'm just trying to get you there. I'm going to be looking at the paint effect that I've used here, sort of in quite a little bit of depth, and we'll be putting the clock together and the grey board clock pieces, and also hi Laura, and also I'll be showing how I managed to get this little piece here. So there's all sorts of elements to it. You can see I've used the resin molds here, and I haven't actually, I'm not going to paint them on air because it's quite a time consuming process, but I've got a couple that I've prepared ready for today's demonstration, so I'm going to use these ones instead. But what I hope to do, if I've got enough time, is just to show you how I mix some of my colours, because I'm still building my collection of Stamperia paint. So what I do is I like to mix the colours that I have got to create the colours that I need. So if I've got time, I want to share that with you as well. I think is Gill ready to go now? Oh, hi, Agatha.
Can Lucrezia let me know whether the camera's changed to a... That's better. At least that looks like it's ran. Yay. Fantastic. So thank you, Rachel, for covering while we sorted out cameras. I'm not great with technology, and so that's always helpful. Let's come out a little bit and we'll move that in. So I have chosen as the base for my make a piece of MDF that is in the shape of a hat, and I've taken a piece of paper from the original Alice collection for this make and drew around it, just because that was going to make my life easier, and I knew which piece of paper I was going to get, and that makes life easy. I'm not going to fuss too much about being overtly paranoid about this piece, because clearly I can trim it or take a file to the paper when I want to switch that. So that makes life easier. And I'm going to use my glue of choice for this type of make, which is the mixed media glue from Stamperia, because it works really well for adhering things. So I'm just got a little bit of adhering to do. So Rachel, if you wanted to have a, because we've all seen people pasting pieces of paper onto things. So if Rachel would like to take over at this point, I'm just going to cover my piece with the mixed media glue and then stick my paper down in place.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely. Cool. Right, so what I sort of started with is I've shown you the molds. Now I've got an MDF substrate that I'm using, and it didn't come with the holes in. I was lucky enough that lots of sorry. I was lucky enough that somebody was able to drill the hole for me, because my drill decided to break. So but I got somebody to drill a hole in here, and what you need to make sure is you need to make sure that your clock mechanism will fit through there. And also, if you look at the one I've got here, you can see there's it's very mirrored in there, and that's because I've used some mirrored acrylic, which again I've drilled a hole in to match that, and that's going to sit. It's going to sit in that piece, and then I've already started a little bit on here and I've added some of the the grey board that I'm going to talk to you about now. So those are the sort of the main pieces, and the most important thing is to make sure your clock mechanism is going to fit through there. Then, as you can see, I've used the grey board set with the clock on, and I wanted to give you a few little tips for this. I've already popped mine out because when you're using these grey board elements, it's really important to take some time when you're popping them out. And a really easy way to do it is to do it on a foam mat or a mouse mat, and just take your time, use a pokey tool, and just slowly poke them out, because obviously they have I think you call it their kiss cut. They have little tiny areas that keep them in here, because otherwise when you got the packet it would just be a whole jumble of things that could get bent up. So there is a good reason for it. Hi Lucia. But it does mean that you need to just take your time and poke them out. So I've done that, and particularly with some of the finer details. So I've done that, and I've also gessoed these pieces, and I've gessoed these ones in white because I'm actually going to use some glossy gel, the heavy body paste glossy gel on these ones. On the ones in my sample I used a crackle paste, but I'm going to go for some glossy gel on these ones. So, and then I will be popping them back in. So if we're going back to, if Jill's ready to go now, I'll get on and paint these with some glossy gel.
So I am absolutely fine to go. I have pre-prepared my tree because it takes a while and it needs to dry. But I'm going to talk you through how the tree is made, because I think that's probably the key part of my make that is different to most things. So if that's okay, so I've got my original tree there. And what I've done is take 12 lengths, and it doesn't really matter how long these are because you can trim and adjust them, but I've taken 12 lengths of 0.8 millimeter craft wire, so it's reasonably soft, and I'm going to use this to form the base for my air dry clay tree because it allows me to manipulate the branches and also gives it a little bit more structure long term. So all I've done is got my pieces together, and I'm going to start by twisting them, literally just twist them together to start to form a trunk. So if you struggle with your hands, then actually having softer wire might make life easier, or just go for multiple strips of smaller wire, because you can bulk out your piece by just adding more clay. It depends on how much clay you've got and what you want to do with it. So literally all I've done is twist them around each other, and I've folded one of the tatty ends up around itself, and these will get all hidden in the air dry clay. But I don't want to hurt myself, and I've got a pair of jewellery pliers to literally help wrap these around and secure things in place. As I say, the exact ends won't really matter, but you can curve them in just by little loops, and that makes life easier. And if I put it against my base, I can sort of work out how big I want my tree to be from there. That's possibly going to be a little bit tall, but it won't matter because this is a demonstration piece rather than the one I'm going to use. So you will need a little bit of extra length, and then all you need to do is take your wire pieces and divide them into, I divided them into two main trunks for my branches, and twist those together, literally twist them and then separate it, divide them up again, because that gives you another branch, like so. twist these ones into place. Like so. And do the same for the top branch. So it's easy enough to do. And it's about artistic interpretation. It doesn't have to be precise. So you've created 2 main branches. And now you can separate them out, twist them again. And you carry on essentially doing this until you have a tree shape that you like. So at the end of the branches, when you've got a piece that you think, right, I need to end this now, I quite like the idea of having 2 different branches at the end. So all I did was take my pieces, work out what I wanted, and then trim these to size with some side cutters. But if you've got robust scissors, they will work because we're not using very strong wire. And then I'm going to just literally, all I've done is roll that in so that it's not a sharp end to poke through. Okay, so that you then repeat that for all of these end pieces until you have a form that you like the shape of. So that's not a particularly difficult piece to do. And then you can make it as big or as small as you want. So this is one going off to the side. We have 2 pieces here. We'll separate that out. So my 3 together here has become 1 branch and then 2 branches. So you're just literally creating a shape that resembles a twiggy tree. We're not after artistic or botanical perfection. We are literally just wanting a skeleton that we can work with. So, Rachel, do you want to take over while I finish off shaping this piece? And then when it comes to adding the next layer, I will let everyone know that I'm ready.
Of course, yeah, I can do that, no problem. Hi Belinda. So I'm just finishing off these little pieces. Oops, wrong side. I'm just making sure I just want to add a slightly different texture to them. So I'm going for something that will gloss them up a little bit and make them look a little bit more interesting. So I'll get that out of the way. And I ended up going for the transparent crackle paste because I couldn't get the lid off my little pot. So unfortunately we have that one. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at putting this together now, which is the front, while I let those pieces dry. And what I need to do is I need to first of all get a piece of paper for the backing of it. So I'm just going to choose. It's so painful choosing the paper from here. It really is. It really destroys me when I'm cutting up the other side of it. It's so beautiful. So, and what I want to do is I'm just going to draw around this piece here. Let me just make sure you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to use this as a template and draw around it and cut it out. And this is what I'm going to use for the back of this piece. And also, while Gill was showing what she was doing with wire, the other thing I did is I put some like sand texture paste, or you can use like a 3D powder with some glossy gel, anything really that will just give you a little bit of texture. So I've created a little bit of texture which I've used my finger just to put in a couple of areas, just to give me a slightly aged effect there. So there we go, I'm all drawn around that, and I'm just going to quickly cut it out. And I want to make sure that I stay within the pencil line on this, because that will give me a neater finish. There we go. Just chopping it out. Well, it's an absolutely glorious day today in my little part of the UK, I've got to say. It started off very unpromising, and it's absolutely gorgeous now.
It's a beautiful day in the north of England as well, which is also somewhat unusual because we are known as the rainiest place in the country, in the northwest. So while Rachel's doing that, if it would come back to me and my wire frame, that would be lovely. So I've got my wire piece that vaguely looks like a very thin skeletal tree, and I've taken a piece of air dry clay and made it into a long thin strip, and literally all I'm going to do is wrap it around the base and give it a jolly good squash to help it stick, and it will also give me a bit of a gnarly trunk because I can shape the tree, wiggle the wires and do what I want. And then this is the bit that just requires a little bit of patience. It's easy enough to add pieces of clay in, so that's not a problem. And I've got some clay sculpting tools because that again will make it makes life easier. But actually you really don't need anything particularly fancy to do this. A craft knife or a palette knife from the kitchen will work really well. So and then it's just a question of moulding the pieces in place along the wires. So we've got another bifurcation here, and the stem needs to thin down, and you'll find that if you just squeeze and stretch your clay, then it will work its way along your pieces of metal, and you'll be able to cover the metal and get rid of the bits that look ugly, and also change the sides. Now I've clearly got a piece at the top of this thread where Lucrezia, can you come back to me, darling, so the guys can see what I'm doing? So I've taken a piece of air dry clay, literally rolled it out and popped it along with my piece. And then all I'm doing is squashing it into place along my metal frame. And the metal frame is the thing that's holding and giving it support from there. Okay.
Okay, are we all right? Hi.
I think that the camera is on you, and I think it could do with coming over to me, if that's possible. Because the most important piece for me is making the tree.
Absolutely, it's a beautiful tree. Hang on, let me see what I can do.
I can't do anything. I think it's Lucrezia who needs to change it because she's backstage. I have no idea how to change the camera.
It's on you, Gill.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. You can tell me how you did that, and for future times, if I'm mad enough to have the pair of us back. So literally all I've done is taken a piece of air dry clay, rolled it out and wrapped it round, and you've got the beginnings of a tree coming here. I'll show you the process on this limb here, because it's a question essentially of repeating itself across it. So just lay a piece of clay over your tray, over your tree, and wrap the clay around it. When you get to a bifurcation or an area where it's going to naturally separate, then just squash and pull. And if you squash and pull, the clay almost walks itself up the wire. Yeah, so you literally just squash, pull, work its way up. If you run out of clay, it doesn't matter, you just patch in a piece and join the ends together. So it really makes life quite easy. So literally squash, pull, lengthen, pull, and over time and a little bit of patience. It took me about an hour to make my original one, and you definitely don't want to be watching me do this for an hour when it's essentially the same process. But you need to cover all of your wire structure basically, which isn't so difficult to do if you're not stressed and you've got a bit of time and and the rest of it. So all I've done there is add in another piece of clay to cover the bit that I didn't like the look of, and I'm now squashing, pulling and taking more of my clay down the limbs of my branches, and you can roll it so it's in place. Once you've got your tree essentially to the place where you want it to be and the shape and all of the metal bits covered, then it's a question of adding some texture. If you want the trunk to be thicker, you just take another piece of clay, roll it out into a nice sausage, flatten it down, and then add it on to the base. And you can make your tree then really quite gnarly by doing that. Now, if you, like me, have then got lots of finger marks and obvious joins, the way to deal with that is just to spray it with a little bit of water. If you add too much, it will go sticky. So just as a word of warning to the wise, and then all you need to do is rub across where your joins are bit by bit, and they will, with a degree of patience and just a little manipulation, smooth themselves out. And tree trunks don't have to be completely smooth, because most trees aren't completely smooth, so it's not as if it's going to be a real problem if you've got some odd marks along the way. But the little adding water does help with getting rid of any obvious finger marks, and it also secures the pieces of the clay together better than just wrapping it round and giving it just a straightforward squash. So I now have a gnarly tree and some branches. I needed to add some texture to my piece, and it's really simple to do. All I've done is take a craft knife and wriggle it gently. I haven't gone very deep. I've literally just added irregular lines, some of them crossing, some of them not, added some little knots across the whole piece, just doing that, because this way we go from this smooth surface here to an area that looks like it's got a lot more texture to it. And then you can do the sides, and you've got a front and a back, so you can do those. And then you just really need take these on to the branches as you go. There we are, and all the way around. And then just set it aside to dry, because if you try and do anything else while it's wet, you'll just knock out all of that texture that you've just put into your piece. So there we are, as I've just done there. And once it's dry, then you can carry on and start to decorate it. So when it was dry, I then added a layer of Morgagno So KAL 103 brown, which is the mahogany brown paint in the current language, let that dry, and then added some of the Stamperia fluid gloss to give it a bit of a sheen, and also to add an extra layer of protection to it. So from there, and then to make it a little bit more interesting and to highlight all of that texture, I've taken some ivory paint, which is KAL 12, but you could just as easily use some of the gold stand, which is KAL 51, and that would work fairly well. And then I've taken one of the really firm brushes from Stamperia, KR86, because it adds texture and allows me to dry brush really well. So I'm adding a little bit of paint to my brush, knocking off most of it, and literally I'm just going to add some text, some dry brushing to my piece, because that allows me, or you, to see much more the texture of the piece that's being created. The bottom part of the trunk you won't see, but the top parts, the trunk of the branch, you certainly will see. So that's that piece. And there. Okay, so I've also got a whole collection of tiny leaves that I've painted with the avocado paint. I've made mine from resin. You could use the ivory resin from Stamperia, you could use ceramic powder, or you could use the soft clay from Stamperia, depending on what you've got around at home, because that's obviously the most important thing, is you use your products and use them as much as possible. Now, these little leaves don't come from the Alice collection. They actually come from the Sleeping Beauty collection mould, which is the one that has the beautiful fairy on it. So K3 PTA 581. So I'm just going to dry brush these, Rachel, if you want to take the camera back. So literally all I'm doing is adding some texture to my leaves. I should carry on while Rachel.
Lovely, that's looking fantastic, Jill.
It just does work. It's yeah, it's quite. I was quite pleased with it, I have to say, when I finished.
Really effective. It looks great. I love the texture on the tree as well. So
do you want to take your camera back so that you can get on with your next piece? So
yeah, I'm good. I'm just at the moment, what I've done in everybody's absence is I have stuck some cogs to the back of my clock frame, and I'm just giving everything a coat of gold paint now, this frame element, a good coat of gold paint. And I've also stuck the frame back around this main piece. So that's all done for me now. Now, the reason I like to use black gesso underneath things is because I think it gives me a little bit more depth. So I do tend to use it quite a lot. If you wanted a brighter effect, you could use a white gesso underneath there, and you get a much brighter effect. But that's what I've done. That's going to be the main clock face now. And so what I can do next is, I think I'll prepare the box ready. So I've got the box section, I've got my little piece of acrylic, and I've cut some strips of paper ready to just stick in here. So let's have a look. Let's get that one in there. And all I'm doing really is I'm just eyeballing it and cutting it with a pair of scissors. I've got the strips, I know I've got the width right, so I can just pop those in. Let's get those in there. One. Just want to make sure that that's a nice fit. That's the most important thing, really. So just that there. And I don't really want to fold it and do it as a piece like that. I need to do it as separates, because that will give a much nicer finish to the end piece. The adhesive I'm using is obviously the Stamperia Extra Strong, because it's just, I mean, I know I'm only sticking paper at this point, but it's just so good at sticking everything. So I'm really confident to use it with just about everything, I think, really. So just on that one there. Now, as you saw on my finished piece, I've got some lights going on in here, and I've managed to put the switch for those lights at the back of my box. And the way I've done that is I've just made a hole with my crocodile, which I shall do now shortly, and you'll be able to see how I managed that. So let's just get these last pieces in. And I also need to make sure I put a couple of pieces in the side, either side for the mirror, because the mirror doesn't actually fill the hole of the back there. So I'm just going to pop what's in there. And let's have another piece. Will that fit just about? I think I'll go with that there. I'll just cut that bit off there. So that's my box lined. And I could, of course, put some paper on the outside of the box as well. Oh, that's interesting measurements I've done there. Hang on a second. I'm just going to pop another little piece there, because for some reason I've snipped that way too early, but that's fine. I can patch that up any way that I like, really. So the next thing I need to do is I need to make a hole that my lights will fit through. So I'm going to take my crocodile, and it will go through this type of material, no problem at all if you've got one of these. And I just decide where I want. I'm going to put the lights through here at the top. And this is I love using this tool to put holes in MDF substrates, because you can do all sorts of things. So, you could put holes in the top here and have things dangling down. You can do all kinds of really interesting things just by making a few holes. It's a really fun thing to do. So I've got that. That's all ready to go. I'm going to stick my mirror in now as well. And again, I'm really confident that this Stamperia adhesive will have absolutely no problem at all in sticking this mirror in here. So I'll just make sure my holes are lined up. There we go. And that's essentially the inside of my box ready for action. So let's get this clock bit next. And what I need to do here is I need to stick these numbers now that the crackle has dried. I need to just stick these back into place. So I don't know if Jill's ready to show you some more of her project there.
I certainly am, Rachel. That would be lovely. So whilst you've been watching Rachel quite happily putting her clock mechanism into place. And didn't she show us wonderful ways of adapting things and doing that with things that we might just have at home, which is brilliant. I've trimmed off the excess paper from my MDF piece. I think, Rachel, you're going to need to swap the camera over. Rachel?
Yeah, hi, I've got you. I'm just messaging.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you. Because, it would be a good, yes. Well, there we are. Right, thanking you very much. So hopefully we'll go live. You'll be able to see a bit more about what I'm doing in a minute. I've taken one of the crackle stamps from Stamperia, which is WTK CC183, and I'm just going to add a little bit of extra detail to the base of my piece. It already has some crackle on it, but I think adding some extra detail is helpful because quite a lot of this will get covered by the tree. So I'm just adding a little bit of stamping using some archival ink. It's important to use an archival ink to do this with. And I've then edged my piece with ink, and all I need to do now is attach the two pieces together.
Oh, it really does, yeah.
So there we are. So literally all we need to do is, I've got some ordinary craft glue, but Rachel's Ultra Forte glue would work just as well, and is often one of the pieces I go to, and that just then needs to slot into place from here. So I now have my my base assembled and some of my pieces put together with a tree that's been dry brushed and is now dry, and I've got a door from the Sleeping Beauty collection which has also been dry brushed with the ivory paint, and I've now got some of the gold Charantica. Just add a little bit extra to it, add as much or as little as you want. I just think it adds a little bit of lightness to the project from there, and that's going to go there. So those are those pieces, and I took the adventure piece from a different mold, one of the Alice molds, painted that with the brown mahogany, added dry brushing with the ivory, and then I've got the Charantica gold to add over the top of it. So that will sit there. Now, one of the things with resin when it dries, and I've used resin, is it bows slightly. So to have a stable base and to help it stick, I'm just going to take a piece of, that'll be old-fashioned cardboard rubbish, because I think it's good to repurpose stuff if we possibly can, and I'm going to cut it approximately to size, and I'm not very good at guessing sizes. So there we go, that will sit on there. And with a bit of luck, in a minute I will have a glue gun that has warmed up sufficiently to allow me to attach things using my glue gun. Because I'm attaching essentially cardboard to cardboard at the back, then ordinary craft glue or the Ultra Forte glue will also work. And I think it's quite important to add this piece now because the tree needs to work around it. So that is going to sit here, sitting on the base piece quite happily, and my tree is going to fit nicely in there. And to make my life easier, I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue here. You could use a gel medium if you wanted to, that's absolutely fine. Really, it's up to you, but all Ultra Forte glue. The advantage, of course, of the hot glue is that you get instantaneous stick, which makes life a bit easier for everyone And because I've got these on wires, I can move that quite happily so that my pieces sit flat, flat on my base. So where I don't like it sitting up, I'm just going to add a little dab of hot glue, push on there, let it settle down until the glue has cooled off a bit. But that allows me to have that sitting where I want it to be. And I can move my branches because they're essentially wired, and that will make my life easier. You will stick because that's what I want you to do. It's interesting, isn't it? When you don't want something to stick, it will stick, and when you do want it to stick, it won't. But there we are. So I then have all of my little leaves that you just need to pop around wherever you feel that they're going to look good. They come in different sizes with different angles. You can pop them onto the base, you can pop them onto the tree itself. But it's quite good because then because the tree is structural, they will pop out from underneath your make, so that everything actually becomes quite a dimensional but interesting piece to work with. So that one can go onto there. If you like, you could of course paint both sides of your leaves. I probably did on the original project, but yeah, that's it's really a question of what you want to do as much as anything else. So that piece can go up onto there. And all I'm doing is adding, I think I've got about 14 leaves, but the number really isn't very critical. I'm going to add these into place before adding my flowers into place. Now, obviously, Blanche gave a wonderful tutorial the other day on how to make foam around flowers for people, and you could just as easily use foam around flowers for this make. I've chosen to visit one of our garden centres and just have a little raid of their floristry section to find faux flowers that I actually like the look of. The importance, if you're buying the faux flowers, is really just to think about the size of the flowers in relation to the project. These came as actually hydrangea heads, so there were quite a lot of them on a head. So although the individual piece was, I think, relatively expensive, actually by the time you divide it around, it'll probably do me about 20 different projects. So literally a little piece of glue, pop my flowers where I want to put them to hide or make it look less like the leaves have just been stuck into place. And literally all I'm doing is adding my flowers. If you give them a little squash and poke as you put them in, then they become more structural, and you end up with a blossom covered tree, which I think is quite pretty. So I'm going to spend the next 10, 15, well, a few minutes at least just adding flowers. So I don't know if Rachel, you want to try and take back the camera for us, and so that it's over you rather than everyone just watching me happily gluing faux flowers onto.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. That would be brilliant. What I'll do actually is I'll tell you what I've been up to quietly in my corner. I've just been assembling the numbers, making sure they're back in to their holes. And I've added my cogs, which you saw, and I painted it gold, and I've just adhered it to the mirror. So that's getting ready for the clock mechanism. Now, what I wanted to do was talk about paint mixing and paint effects and things like that. And so I want to really show you how I got this sort of distressed effect here, and what I did, and how I mix the colours that I have to get the colours that I want. So I'm just cleaning a little bit of this gritty stuff out of the way, so I've got space here to show you. So when I painted this, I wanted a really nice pale blue. So if you've got a black and a white, or a black and an ivory, you can make all your colours darker or lighter, obviously by adding different amounts of the black and the white. But I kind of like wanted, oh dear, excuse me, I kind of wanted to add other hues as well. So I've done a few other things, and I also wanted to show you how I mixed a skin tone with the paints I had, because I'll show you what the paints I've got. I've got these paints. These are my Allegro Stamperia paints, which I really love. I love the consistency and I love how they work. But as you can see, there's no real skin tone colour in there. So I mixed my own, and the way I do that is the same I do when I paint with any acrylics, really. I picked a colour that was sort of had a let me just grab a piece of paper to put that on. I think is a sensible thing. So I grab the white, or in this case, this is ivory. So I've got that. And then to that, I'm adding a little bit of this colour, which is Cookie. And I'm using this colour because it's got a little bit of a yellow tone in it. If I were using, doing an acrylic painting, I would use something with a yellow tone in it. And then the other colour I'm going to use is red. And now with this, you need to be super, I'm going to squirt the red over here so that I can bring in just a tiny bit, because these colours are so pigmented. They're such good quality pigment that you do have to be aware of that when you're mixing them. So I'm going to mix the white and the Cookie together. And you can see that's quite a nice beigey sort of colour. We're sort of verging on skin tone, well, certainly for a Caucasian skin tone. But what I need is just the tiniest bit of red into that mix, just to give me that sort of complexion. So you can see, so even though I haven't got that colour in my paint set here, I'm able to mix that. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix the colour I want to use on the outside of my box, because this blue for me is a little bit too dark for what I want. So I'm adding some blue and some of the ivory. And I also want to add just a little bit of this green in there as well, just a little. So I'm going to pop that there because I don't want loads of it. I'm going to take a slightly bigger brush now, and I'm going to mix. I'm going to stay to this poor brush. It's had a hard life. So my blue is much paler, which I like. That's where I was going, but I do want a little bit of a turquoise edge to it. So I'm just going to add little bits of that green at a time, just until I get the colour I want. There we go. So that's more the colour I want. And I don't want too much on my brush because I want to give it quite a dry brush on here. There we go. Just adding that blue colour now. Yeah, and I'm quite happy with that. That's exactly how I want it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just give that a little blast with a heat gun. It won't take, because I've hardly used any paint, it won't take long at all. There we go, that's just about there. And then I'm going to use some laser gel, but I believe there is a Stamperia product that will do exactly the same thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm taking a very, very damp brush. Now this product is actually made as a wood stain, but I really like using it to add a little bit of age and definition to things. Now, I know this looks horrendous right now, but it's okay. I'm not scared. Maybe I should be. Now, if this is something that you're not necessarily familiar with and you might want to take a little bit of time with, just do it a bit at a time. Just do it a little bit at a time and don't fret. I'm not ruining it. What I'm doing is I'm then taking off the product. You can get a similar effect, a very similar effect if you water down paint, but it's not quite as effective as these antiquing type products. I'm saying these antiquing type products. This isn't one of those at all, but it's what I use it for. And I just really love the effect that it gives me. I know it looks awfully messy, and you could look at this and just think, what is she doing? And I think that's one of the things I love about using it. And I quite often, when I paint my resin molds, I'll go over them like this and then blot it off, because it just adds a bit of definition and just gives that age look, and I just love it. I'm just adding, a little bit of water there. I didn't actually want any colour, I just wanted some water, because this is drying quite quickly because it's quite a hot day. There we go, you can see I'm really blotting that off there. But I think the effect, as you can see, I just love that effect. There we go. So then once I've got that on there, I'm going to give it another little blast with a heat gun. Just a little one.
So whilst Rachel has been happily doing that, and she's drying, if I have the camera back, I will show you where I've got up to so that you can see what's going on. So I have now got my hat MDF piece secured to its base, my door in place, my cycle and my tree covered with blossoms, and I've just snuck in a tiny little butterfly, which is part of the Alice Collectibles papers, because I felt that the tree needed something just a little bit extra. Now, on the base of my piece, I actually have some little mushrooms, which I'm in the middle of painting, but they're really quite easy to make. So let me just grab a piece of clay and I will show you how simple the two different types are. This is just 3 together. This is a flat cap, so make them whatever colour you want. So literally all I have done is taken the tiniest bit of air dry clay, excuse the state of my hand, made it into a circle, and then I have taken the end of a brush, pushed it into it, and just gently shaped the cap, and there we are. one little straightforward mushroom cap, and for this type of tree, I just made a slightly bigger piece, made it into a ball, because that seemed like the sensible thing to do at the time. Popped it on my mat, which has now got a square inch of working room, which all relate to, and gave it a little squash to get a lopsided circle. And then I wanted it to be domed, so I've taken a sculpting tool and literally just shaped my piece over the top of it to give me the flat cap look. And obviously you can make these as big as you want, and mushrooms have gills, and I find the easiest way of adding the gill is just to take the back of the blade and just add the lines in place like this, so that you've got all of the indentations, and then left those to dry. Now, to make the stalks is even simpler. If you start out with a sausage shaped piece of clay, I've got something that the clay users describe as a snake roller, but essentially it's a thin acrylic block, so your stamping blocks will work. And literally, if you just roll it back and forth until you get it to the width that will fit in the top of your, or inside your mushroom. And if you want it to be more shape, just press more on one end. So whilst I was wanting to make it long and thin, I had my acrylic block flat. I want it to thin out at the end, and I've literally put one end on the surface, and now I have a shaped piece of clay, the end of which I can pop into my mushroom, and then I can cut the end to the size that I want it to be for my piece. And you can add as many of those and make them as big or as small as you want. So that creates those. And now what have I done with my red mushroom that I had happily out here a minute ago and now can't see in amongst the pickle? Anyhow, in the grey paint, that's always a good move. So we'll just redo that. So I've kept the caps of my mushrooms, I've painted brown because that was the colour I wanted them. And then the red, the cardinal red is quite a bright red, and I felt it was too red for my mushroom top that I wanted red. So I've actually just mixed in a little bit of the Morgagno to make it a colour that I was happier with. And there we are. So those can sit and dry. That can go in there to be washed. And then the labour of love starts, because I have then got a whole mountain of resin pieces that I need to paint, because I didn't do them ahead of live, which was maybe a little too risky in that respect. But actually I felt that seeing people come and paint them live was probably quite a good thing, because I certainly, when I first saw them all, thought it was far too intimidating and difficult to do this. And actually what you need is a degree of confidence in yourself, and then a collection of nice small size brushes. Doesn't matter who from, you just need a collection of small brushes. And I took the inspiration for all of my colours from the papers, but I did end up with having to do quite a lot of custom colouring to get what I wanted. So I based my skin colour on the golden sand and added, because that's got a yellow tone, and then added some of the powder blush to warm it up a little bit, to give me something that I felt was a bit more skin tone, and I still felt that that was a little dark. So I've added in some of the white to reduce it down to a colour that I hoped was going to be reasonably close to a skin tone. I mean, obviously everyone's skin tone differs, and so it's important that you work with what you've got. So I have several pieces of my mould. So I'm just going to pick up my moulds and paint them. So I've got my Mad Hatter, but he obviously needs a pink face. Would be helpful, I think, to have a pink face. I think he also could do with a pink hand rather than anything else. So I've literally just got my small brush and we've got another hand over here. So literally just adding my paint to those. So with a little bit of time and patience, nice fine brushes, you really can get there. Alice clearly has a pink neck, which would be good. Pink face is also good, I think. This is why it's a bit altogether a bit scary. So there we are. And you might, depending on what you've used as your base, need to add some gesso underneath. I personally would have used white gesso for this because of the colours that I'm using, rather than Rachel's choice of the black gesso. But it's entirely actually up to you what you feel will work for you in amongst all of this. And we've got some hands to decorate here. So if you look at your paints, you can create quite a nice skin tone quite happily, just with a little bit of custom mixing. There we are. And there. So what's the next? So the next thing I need you to do is to add some of the yellow to my dress, because the dress in the current section is cream based with some little flowers on it. So I'm using the gold sands, and I'm literally just going to add that onto here to cover the base of my dress. Rachel, do you need to say anything? I'm quite happy painting away, and will carry on doing so.
Yeah, that's lovely. I'll carry on with this this painting. That would be great. Thank you. So at the moment, I'm just I'm assembling another element that's going to go on to the piece at the moment. So, and I'll tell you how I did this, and then we'll finish up that painting. What I've done is I've cut out from that. I mean, I absolutely love the sheet of cards in the Alice pack. It's just brilliant, and it's just so handy to add to so many different projects. So I've cut some of those out, and when I cut them out, I always like to round the corners rather than trying to cut the corners. So I've done that, and then what I've done is I've actually taken a plastic cup and I've just cut a ring of it off, and that's what I'm going to use to attach my cards and have them dangling there. So I'm going to pop that to one side just while I finish off this painting now. So we've done a layer of some sand with some sand texture paste, then we've added some gesso, then I've mixed the acrylics to the colour that I wanted and added those. Then I've added some of the laser gel, which I've put on and wiped off. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to use my finger for this, because, you know, I just think fingers are very, very underrated sometimes. They can be really handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush my finger with some gold. I've got a little bit of gold paint. Wherever you can get some. I think there is a really nice paste that Stamperia do that would work. Or if you prefer using waxes, you could use waxes for this. But I'm just using some antique gold paint that I like, and just brushing this over some of the raised areas. So, and this is the same gold that I painted the clock face with as well. So it just has got a little bit of continuity, that's the word. So I'm just doing that, and then I'm going to come around the rim here, just quickly. And then when I've done that, I'm going to go back with some of that lovely cookie colour, because I have found that that cookie colour is rather brilliant at giving a very subtle sort of aged effect. I don't know if it's sort of verging on rust, I'm not sure, but it's got a great effect, especially with this bluey turquoise colour. So I'm just going to, there we go, I'm happy with that now. So it's just, yeah, you've got to, if you're going to use your fingers, you've got to not mind having lucky hands, really. Right, there we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this brilliant cookie colour, and I'm just going to add a little bit of this now, just to finish off this effect. And I want quite a dry brush, so I'm just going to grab a little bit of kitchen roll and dry my brush off, because I want it to be nice and dry for this. I'll just put some on a piece of paper for now. So I'm working on some paper for you, because my black mat will it will reflect too much, and it won't be a pleasant experience for you. So I'm just using some of this cookie. Hopefully you can see that. It just, I don't know, it's just got hints of, to me, hints of rust, hints of plaster. It's just a really great colour for creating that distressed look. It's one of, you know, I mean, I really like, if you follow me or you know my work, you know that I like creating grungy, distressed, steampunky, rusty looking things, and this is just a great colour for that. It's really, really good. So I'm just going to add a few more little bits of that. And I think we're about done now with that. Let's have a look. Just rubbing it in with my fingers again. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'll just show you. Hopefully you can see that. I'm sorry, the sun is so bright coming through the window. I'm trying not to let it get onto here, but it is a little bit. There we go. So that's oh, fantastic, Marie, fantastic. I love an altered book. So that's that done, and we'd already put that paper on the back, and the reason that paper's there is because the mirror that's inside here is obviously going to reflect what it sees, and if it has that paper to reflect, that will give quite a nice effect. So I've got my clock mechanism. Now, one of the really important things that I'd like to share with you, and then I'm sure, I don't know if Jill's ready to come back to you, is I've got my clock mechanism, and
I'm ready whenever you are.
Oh, fab. I forgot for a moment that ovals aren't circles. You know, obviously I know ovals aren't circles, but I forgot that the length of my hands was fine. It's absolutely fine in the vertical. They fit into here beautifully in the vertical, but in the horizontal, they're rather too long, which is very disappointing because it means that they can't go around the clock, and the same with the second hand. So what I did is I trimmed them, and now it's time to confess the truth. I'd stuck them down, I'd put them in place, I'd attached them to the mechanism before I realised that there was no way they were going to go around the sides of the clock. And so I had to pull them off to cut them. And unfortunately, when I did that, I actually broke this mechanism. I need to put a new one in this one. So I've learnt my lesson with that one, and I've learnt that when you're putting your clock together, make sure everything fits before you actually put it in its final position. Oh, thank you, Margaret. That's so kind of you. Thank you. So anyway, I'm going to, luckily for me, these hands are just plastic. So I'm just going to cut them, trim them with my scissors and make sure they fit. And then I'm just going to pop it all together, pop the mechanism in there. So if you want to go back to Gill, so she can, oh, there we go, popping that in paint, silly me. I'm sure there she is.
Very good. So whilst Rachel has been beavering away, I have been painting my characters. So what have I done? Well, I wanted a yellowy coloured skirt, and I've mixed ivory and gold sand together to give me this colour. The hair, I've actually used corn paint, which is this beautiful yellow here. And obviously my shoes I've done with the mahogany. So those are those pieces. And sometimes you just need an extra layer from here. On Mad Hatter, I've used corn for the coat and the base of the tie. And then I have added dots using a ball tool and the marks on the resin to the bow tie. And I've used the red straight from the pot for both of his trousers and also for the teacup. And then we've got some more custom colouring to do, because neither the green avocado or the blue gave me the shade that I wanted for my pieces. And so what I've done is take quite a lot of the blue, because I want a very definitely bluey green colour, and a little bit of the avocado, and then mixed them until I was happy with the shade. And you really do need quite a lot more blue than green, because as Rachel said, these paints are quite heavily painted, and the darker the base paint, the more pigment there is in them. But that gives me this beautiful sort of ducky egg shade of blue, bluey green, which I rather like. And I've then used that for my coat, and I've also used it for Alice's dress and for the Mad Hatter's hat. And I will show you once I've done this, when I stop making a mess, how I added the detail to the hat. Because although it looks to be quite intricate, actually it's not as detailed as you might think, which is always a reassuring thing to hear, isn't it? When you look at images on the photo, on papers, and think, how on earth am I going to recreate that? Now, we had a white collar, and you could quite happily paint the collar white, or you could leave it the natural colour of the resin. I did paint it white on my original pieces. So let me just add my hat, because this piece will need to dry before I can add the colouring to that, which is why I'm doing it in the order that I'm doing it in. There we are. say, in real life, you might find that you wanted to, do this with a couple of layers, and just take your time. Small brushes, steady hand, and just a little bit of time will get you there. It's not a race, and it should be an enjoyable process. And if it's not an enjoyable process, put it down. Find a different project to do, because actually life is too short to be worried about things. Now, on my piece, my shoes are not going to be on display, so that doesn't really matter. But I will give the legs a little bit of a wash with white, or dirty white, if the case may be. But they will be covered, so it won't matter. And in the process of doing that, you can see that you can then, you can amend what you've done quite happily, just with adding your paint a little bit at a time to what you're doing. So let me just pop a little bit into there. So Mad Hatter needs to dry before I can do the next bit on the hat. But I would add another layer. If you try adding another layer now, all that will happen is actually you'll lift the layer below. So you're definitely better off just taking your time and adding it little bit by little bit. Now I've got a tiny brush here, and I'm going to use that same green just to add the top ruffle to Alice's dress, and also to the cuff of her sleeve, with a little band around the middle, and also to that then allows me to swap to a bigger brush to do the ruffle on the skirt. Now I've chosen to keep my ruffle there, but again I will show you how simple it was to add my not so floral flowers to the skirt in a minute, because that bit I did first so that it's actually dry, and I can show you what I did to achieve that. And I'm going to use the same glue, use the shaky hand for the stripes on the tights. Yeah, so Alice is reasonably there. So to add, what did I do to add my flowers and make it really easy for me to work with? Well, I literally just took a small brush and dabbed off nearly all of the paint and just added literally a smattering of red. And you think, well, it doesn't look like a flower. And you're right, it looks like a splodge. But it doesn't matter, because by the time you're layered, it won't matter. It really is the same. And then I've used the same blue that I've used for her skirt, and just done the same to give the impression of actually having some leaves and some flowers on her skirt and on her top. So it doesn't have to be, and here where it's too dark, if you just literally blot it down with your fingers, you'll lose the fact that it's blocked. It's just the splodges, and it will soften in. And if it's still too much, then add with your finger a little dab of your base colour over the top, and you will then have your painted dress. Take as much time as you need to do that, because this isn't a race, even though we are on a time limit. And we don't want to keep you here for way too long. So there we are. Keep there into there. Yeah. There. So Mr. Rabbit needs a red bow, so we can do him. And you just need to take your time adding, you can get a different brush, the red to create your heart. And I've got my black brush held quite flat because actually that just means that it's touching the surface. I spent quite a long time doing this to have it looking neat and tidy, but you can tidy it up at the end. It's not such a great problem to do that. So there are my parts almost added. That. So we've got some hearts in there. Right. So, and Rabbit, of course, has a big heart on his banner that hangs from underneath his cornet or whatever it might choose to be. So that leaves, as I promised, talking about how did I do these marks on my hat. Okay. And of course, the brush you want is not the one that you can find. But hey ho. So I've just got an oblique-ended brush, and I added, again, use that dry brush technique, and I just added a square here, and a square there, and a square there. And they're not having to be exact because actually everything's at an angle. So it doesn't really matter, does it? Because they're not going to be exactly square in reality. And I use some of the red and added in and filled in with the corn. So that way you can add in your details to create an effect that looks like picture you have, but doesn't necessarily have to be identical to it. So that's how I created both the hat effect and also the flowers. I'm just going to paint my rabbit in shades of whites and greys. So Rachel, do you want to have the full screen back so that you can show where you're up to? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's lovely. That's fabulous. Those characters are just so detailed and so lovely, and I love the crispness of colour you get when you have when the colours are going onto the white. The colours are really crisp, aren't they? They're really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
really
I think
right. Well, what I've been up to is, well, as you can see, I've used the Stamperia glue to glue my light switch here, because the lights I'm using are cork lights, bottle lights, just because I like the light that they give. So I've got those in there now. I've taken them through that hole we made and then just wound them around. So I'm going to turn those off carefully because the glue is still wet. There we go. So I'll turn this over carefully, and I also added my clock. Let me turn that around. I added my clock hands and did all of that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put my front piece on. But before I pop it on, I need to just make sure that I've got this this piece of plastic cup with the cards that I've popped on. I just want to make sure I've got some adhesive on that. My goodness, I am so lucky. My hands are filthy. So I'm just going to put some of this adhesive on there, just stick that onto a corner, and then I'll stick this on. Again, just using the Stamperia extra strong adhesive. So got that on there, and then that will sandwich the plastic that's holding the cards in with everything else. I'm just making sure that's lined up nicely. Yeah, and that's great. That's going to sit nicely. So that will go there like that. Now I want to add my I want to add my little toadstools in here. Hang on, let me just. I will be sorry if I don't, because this glue is so good. There'll be no getting it off if it's in the wrong place. It's just. There we go. That's better. Right, so I want to add my little toadstools that I've got. And I've got a little handy way of doing that. I mean, obviously these are quite tricky to fix into position, and an easy solution for it is to use just some air dry clay and create a little stump to put them in, basically, is what I'm doing. So I'm going to pop these where I want them, and then once I've got the holes and I know where I'm going to position them, I'm popping adhesive in those holes so they are firmly in there, like so. So they are ready to go in, and I've got another one that I'm going to do the same with, and they'll be ready to go into my clock frame. So they are good to go. So I'm just going to pop them to one side just for that adhesive to dry a little bit with them in it. And then I'm going to just put my characters in. And a little tip when you're popping your characters on, and this is also a good tip when you're doing a journal page or a painting, anything like that, is the direction that your characters are looking in is the direction that the eye will be drawn in when they're looking at it. So if your characters are facing a certain way, like this character is obviously facing that way, then I need to have that facing in towards where I want the eye to be drawn. So if you look at these guys like this, and then if I swap them round, you'll see the difference. So it's quite subtle, but it does take your eye away, because you want to look where the other eyes in the picture are looking. So that's a really good tip for any type of project. If one of your subjects is looking in a certain way, just be aware that that's the direction that the eye will be drawn in. Now with sticking these on, because the way the resin sets, you get a little bit of a lip. Now that can make it quite sort of tricky to stick things down. So again, I'm just going to use some of this air drying clay, and I'm going to pop it with some glue onto the back of here, and that way I know that it's going to make contact with the other surface, and I'm going to get a really good adhesion. And I'm just putting some glue then on the back of that piece of clay, and I can push it into position, and I'm confident then that that's going to stay where I want it to go. And I should do the same with these guys as well. These guys. I'm saying that like I know them. These guys. Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I think I probably do know them. Right, let's stick that into place. So again, I've just popped some adhesive on there. And let's pop them into place. Just checking behind because I want to make sure that that clay is behind the characters, and it is. Let's slide them across slightly as well, actually. There we go. And then checking that clay behind. So that's kind of the outside of this is done. I just need to pop my mushrooms in, and I'm going to use some sisal then in the bottom because that will then cover up the clay for me and just make it look a little bit ethereal in there. So there you go. So this, unfortunately, because I'm sticking plastic here, it would prefer to be left to just dry quietly on its own. It's not enjoying being moved about, but there we go. What are you going to do? So there we go. That's so far where we're at, and I'm going to get in there now, and I'm going to pop some sisal and my toadstools, and then I will be just about finished. So let's pop those toadstools in there, and I'm just squashing any of the excess clay, and I'm also being mindful as well that I don't want my mushrooms to interfere with my clock mechanism and stop it going round. That was another lesson I learnt when I did the first version of this. So there we go. Let's stick this one in. There we go. I say there we go an awful lot, don't I? It's my new thing I say a lot, I think. I used to say bear with me a lot, but I've moved on to there we go. Right, I'm just going to grab this sisal.
Right, Rachel, have you are you at a reasonable place for swapping over, or are you still really busy?
Well, I was going to just pop this sisal on, Jill, and then I'm done.
Okay.
So
well, I've finished painting all my pieces, so that's always a good thing, isn't it? Next time I'll make those
wonderful. You'll be done soon as well then.
I certainly will.
Wonderful. Right, I'm just trimming some of this sisal off, and then I'm done. I'll get in there. There we go. Right, so I may trim this sisal a little bit more, but there you go. You can see that's my project finished.
Brilliant. So if we come back to me, I will say what I've done for my painting, and to add the details when I can, because there is a very useful trick that the lovely Dorota Kotowicz, and excuse me to the poor Polish ladies, because I've probably said that entirely wrongly, but hey ho, it's the best I can do. For adding detail to the pieces. So I have my pieces all completed, and the trick that, because it's quite difficult to add lots of detail, actually is to just take a pen and add marks where you want to, and they will blur in a little bit, but it allows you to add quite a lot of detail to your pieces. Now what I do suggest is that you let your pieces dry properly, which I haven't, and you give them a coat with the glossy fluid and let that dry before you do that. Otherwise you'll start to lift off your colours, which I have done here. But if I draw these now into the lines on her hair, you suddenly get all of the details. I have actually also added a little bit of Umbra patina, so as a wax, and then wiped back most of it. But you really do need your pieces protected with the fluid gloss first, and you can add as much, and you can add a little dots for the eyes, and it really does help bring out lots more detail. So having completed all the pieces, then actually it's a question of gluing together. Now I would decorate the backs. I think that the back pieces look more completed, and my Alice is going to go on the door. My rabbit is going to go on the door, and that leaves me with the very obvious problem as to how on earth do I support my Mad Hatter. And I've used Rachel's trick. I've taken a piece of air dry clay and just used that, and to hold it in place whilst add the other bits. So I've got a piece of air dry clay put here, glued into place. So my Mad Hatter is there. I've got a clock to add here. I've got a tree that's currently got a straight edge that I want to sit at an angle, and below Alice's, so I want it to sit like that. So I'm lining up in the direction I want, and then I've just literally, I move that into camera, cutting that bit. So I've now got that sitting at the angle I want, and I'm going to add my single piece of mushroom there, and I'm going to tuck this one, the set of 3, to the back, and then it is literally a question of watching your fingers, being careful, because burnt fingers hurt. Yeah, and I would know, clearly I would know that because I've done it. And then just tuck pieces of moss around everything to cover areas that you don't like the look of or that you need to disguise. So my piece of air dry clay is now covered, and my gaps are covered, so I don't need to worry about that. I've got a big gap down there, so I'm going to pop another piece of that into there. Grab a new glue stick. I want a tiny piece down there to hide into there. That will help disguise that. And I think I'll have another piece down there. So all of my pieces now have got, that I might want to disguise, have all got their bits of moss around them. I went to one of our local craft forestry wholesalers, and I've got some little spiky bits, but you can now add whatever you want, wherever you want, just so that it suits your eye. So I added a few of these, just using some hot glue and a little bit of, I think it's called gentle persuasion rather than brute force. But you can pop them wherever you want. Just stick them into place. Cover any, fill any gaps. Just give it a little bit of interest in where you want it to be. Of course, you could just as easily add some different flowers if you wanted to. Right. Then I have taken if I can find it, a little bit of washing up sponge with a little bit of white paint on it, dabbed it off, added white paint to my moss so it didn't look all quite the same, and also some of the plastic elements in there. And then finally, if I can find what I've done with it, because everything fell on the floor. Right, I've taken some craft glue and just added little bits of craft. Ah, there it is. Got the end of it. But just added some areas of craft glue before sprinkling happily with some of the Stamperia Glamour sparkles, and I've got burnt umber and the red, and I deliberately wanted a little bit of a mix to pick up some of the other colours. So here we are. And obviously this project's then going to need a good shake over a bin to get rid of all of the pieces. So let's hope that nothing falls off while I do that. And let me just clear this mess, because currently I think you probably cannot see very much other than a bit of a car crash because it's so messy. But there we are. So that is my finished piece, Rachel.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
So the thing that Rachel and I didn't say earlier on is that we were doing this live, having been asked to by That's Crafty. They have their own Facebook page, and both Rachel and myself have agreed that we will give away our mates from today's live to a random person who comments on our post on the That's Crafty Creatives page. It's easy enough to join, just ask to join and one of us can add you. And then next week we will pick 2 people at random. We'll make sure that we've got a photograph of my project and one for Rachel's, and we will send it out. Now, if it's going out to Europe, we might have a little bit of a headache because the postal service, last time I sent something to Greece, decided it would go AWOL, and 4 months later it's still not there. So we will send them to those people who to a random person. So thank you very much. Rachel, do you want to add anything, darling?
No, just thank you very much. Thank you. And it's just been a real pleasure being here this afternoon. I've had great fun. Thank you.
I'm just going to move my camera because then I can so that I can see what I'm doing. No, I'm all upside down. Sorry if I've just made anyone feel seasick in that process. So we're both where we are. Excellent. It's always good. So I hope that you've all enjoyed us making today, and that we haven't taken a ridiculous amount of time for you, but you've learned something. Please remember to like and share this video so that you might be in with a chance to get your Stamperia pizza box, and also to pop over to That's Crafty Creative page and find our posts. But I think Rachel and I will repost our projects to this evening so that there's an up-to-date one of our finished makes, and we'll flag, both of us will flag our post with clear message that says this is the post to comment on if you'd like to be in with a chance to get this. And if that's all right, we're going to finish now. Is that okay? Happy, Rachel?
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Bye.